Are you struggling to win your chess matches? I'm international master Evgeny Alexeyev with 20 years of playing and over 8 years of teaching experience. In this video, I'm gonna share with you 3 game-changing tips that have helped me win multiple international tournaments and are gonna help you win your very next chess game. Whether you are at 1000 or 1500 ELO, these tips are designed to instantly elevate your game. Stick around and I will reveal the exact strategies that top players are using to dominate their opponents. Let's take your chess to the next level. What's up, chess player, and welcome to the Journey to Grandmaster, the place where you can improve every single aspect of your chess game. Before we start, I have a huge announcement. We have finally crossed 10,000 subscribers, and this Saturday we are gonna play a tournament together. You have a great chance to play multiple games against me as well as other members of our amazing community. Make sure to join the tournament using the link in the description before it's too late. In addition to that, you can win a completely free one-on-one lesson with me. More on that later on. This is the final round of Munich Open, round number 9. I have played as black and my only chance to try to win a prize was to win this game. I'm gonna share with you exactly what I used to try to outplay my opponent as black. He was almost 2100 rated, but this is a huge underestimation of his level, because this tournament he played at 2400 level before our game, so I knew this is a very strong player. So we started with d4, d5, he played knight to f3, knight to f6, and then he surprised me with the move g3, because it's not like he plays it very often. He normally goes for c4, and so I played the move bishop f5, which was a surprise to him as well. So basically, I played the London system as black. I mean, the opening that I really hate when you are playing it as white, because as white you want to be active, you want to fight. This is like the first tip for you in terms of the openings. Try to be active as white, try to control the center and create some pressure on your opponent. But as black, the first thing you want to do is to equalize the position. And the London system, if your opponent plays like that, knight f3 and g3, he doesn't really have an opportunity to attack your b7 pawn from the very beginning, then this bishop f5 idea is so cool. I mean, the engine says it's equalized immediately, and at least you don't have any opening problems. My opponent played bishop to g2, e6, castles. Now I played the move h6 because I don't want to lose this bishop. It controls a lot of squares, and h6 is a very useful move. In case my opponent plays knight to h4, I can just drop it back to h7 and control the entire diagonal. Now finally he tries to fight for the center. He plays c4 and I'm playing c6. He was spending so much time on these first moves, which was a clear indication for me that he is not very well prepared for this line. And this is very, very important in chess, if you can surprise your opponent. Nowadays, so often it's not about playing objectively like the best move, the best variation in the opening, but rather the one that is gonna surprise your opponent, that he is not prepared for. This is what it's all about, because if you do that, he knows you know the stuff, you play like a computer, and he doesn't have any idea what's going on. And so he's stressful. And this is exactly what I achieved in this game, because my opponent, even though he played all of the right moves up to a certain moment, it was clear he is not that confident. Knight goes to c3, knight b to d7. So the first golden rule I want to share with you is about the opening. In the opening, you must bring all of your pieces into the game. You should do it as fast as possible and as active as possible. This is like the golden principle, because so many players are doing it wrong. Even my own students. I mean, I talk about it all the time. I try to explain how important it is to invite everybody to the party. Yet, still when people are developing a few of their pieces, they are trying already to create something out of it, create some threads, go forward. Whenever you have an opportunity to develop a new piece into the game, you should have a very, very, very good reason not to do it. This is the golden rule that is gonna help to elevate your chess instantly. Just focus religiously on your development. The golden principle is one piece, one move, and watch what's gonna happen to your results. Now, my opponent figures out the right plan for white, which is to fight for the center here. And this is, by the way, the right plan in so many different variations. You need to fight for the center. all of the most important actions are going to happen in the center of the board. So my opponent plays knight to d2 back because he wants to open up the bishop, and the knight itself also controls this key e4 square, which makes it possible for white to play the move e4, and this is exactly what happened. I'm playing here bishop to e7, and he goes for e4. Now I'm just exchanging that. Knight takes, because you want to open up the bishop. This is the knight you want to move here. By the way, notice that he did make a second and now a third move with the same piece, but he did it for a very good reason. That is why it's an exception, to fight for the center. If you don't have such a reason, just never make moves that are not developing a new piece. Now I am taking this knight with the knight because I want to reduce the amount of material. You notice that white is controlling more space than I do as black. So for me, it makes sense to exchange a pair of pieces so that I have enough space for all of the remaining stuff on the board, and it's gonna be simpler for me to deal with all of the pressure and then start to outplay my opponent. So when you play as white, your first task is to equalize the position, and then starting from there, try to figure out a way to outplay him. Here is the first surprise for me, because normally you take here with the knight as white. I had a game like that, but for some reason my opponent decided to exchange the bishops as well and took with the bishop. Now for a beginner that might seem like an insignificant thing, but actually this is a component of the game which distinguishes a strong chess player from a weak one. A strong one always knows which pieces to exchange and which pieces to leave on the board. Let's look at those bishops here. Let's bring it back to g2. So we have this bishop here controlling the entire diagonal and helping white to potentially play this move d5, which would help to open up the entire position, maybe undermine some weaknesses like the b7 pawn, maybe bring the pieces to the center like this knight to d5 and so on. And they have this bishop on f5, which is actually not doing anything useful, because yes, it's controlling this entire diagonal, but there is absolutely nobody doing that. Also, this bishop on g2 is controlling all of the light squares in the white's camp. So if you remove it, which is exactly what happened in the game, then you have those holes in the white's camp, and this is exactly what I started to play on. So please remember it for your entire life. Before you exchange the pieces, try to just imagine they are not there on the board anymore, and try to decide whether it's better for you or for your opponent, who is benefiting more from the absence of those pieces. In this case, at least to my eyes, it's clearly black. So you don't need to necessarily create weaknesses in your camp. This is exactly what so many lower-rated players are doing, and I hope this is something you're not gonna do in your games. Let me share with you how I managed to exploit those weaknesses and bring the full point home, as well as how you can use the same strategy to outplay your chess opponents. This video is brought to you by Chestnut. They create amazing smart chess boards like this one, Chestnut Evo, that helps me as a chess professional, as a chess player, to analyze all of my games, just like I'm doing right now here with the help of this screen. So I have connected lead chess to here, which works without any difficulties at all. And then I have all of my analysis, the engine if I need it, the blunders, the mistakes, the great moves, and I can just insert all of the variations I analyze during the game and then take a look at that later on from my laptop, from anywhere, just logging into my account. This board has so many features, absolutely everything you can imagine for playing chess with your friends, for training chess with the books, which I love to do so much here because it's so convenient. I have never had such an experience before. If you are interested in any of the Chestnut products, they have so many amazing boards. Feel free to use the link in the description or just the Journey to Grandmaster coupon code to get a big discount on your purchase. First of all, I want to stop this move d4, d5, because I thought the more pieces are going off the board, the weaker those pawns become. So I don't need to allow this d5 move when my opponent is going to be able to exchange all of his weaknesses, simplify the position, and then good luck trying to win a completely symmetrical pawn structure without any weaknesses. To do that, I played knight to f6. First of all, I'm attacking this knight, making d5 tactically impossible. Secondly, my knight is controlling this square and opening up the queen, which is also controlling that square. So I'm making another move, the second move with the same piece that I have already developed. But I did it for a very good reason, to stop my opponent's biggest idea. And this is my second powerful tip for you. Use the method of 3 questions to elevate your game. I have discovered this method from one of the best coaches in the chess world, Jacob Agard, in one of his books. So the idea is that top players thinking about certain things during the chess game. And he discovered there are 3 things they are thinking the most that you should focus on when you're playing chess. The first one is, what are the weaknesses? In our case, those are the light squares as well as this d4 and c4 pawns. The second question is, what's your opponent idea? In our case, that was the move d5, which I am now stopping with the move knight to f6. And the third one, what is the worst placed piece? So you should just look at your position, decide which is the worst placed piece and try to improve it. I have made a dedicated video about this life-changing method. It's going to appear somewhere here. Definitely take a look at that once you're done with this video. My opponent played knight to c3 back, because if you take here on f6, you make it even simpler for me to put pressure on this weakness on d4, because the bishop comes to f6, I have double attack, then I can bring the rook there, and it's not convenient for you at all. My opponent plays knight to c3 instead, which makes my bishop at least not that active still. On f6 it would be, of course, much more dangerous for him. But the drawback is of course very clear. I am making a move forward, improving my knight's position. He is going back with the knight, making his knight not that great, and he's wasting yet another tempo. So this is exactly what you should try to avoid in your games if possible. To make my next move, I focus on what is the most important thing in the opening. We have already discovered that. Of course, that's the development, and castles is a very important step of that development, because you're bringing your king into the safety and you are developing yet another piece, which is the rook. My opponent plays bishop e3, bringing the last minor piece into the game, and I'm playing queen to a5 here. So far I have developed all of my minor pieces, and now it's time for the major pieces. This is the right order. Minor pieces first, major pieces second. I'm bringing my queen to a5 because I know my rooks belong to the d file, and frankly, I just still remembered that that is the best move according to the engine in the main line, which would be this knight takes e4 instead of bishop takes e4 with the bishops on the board. So here it's even better, I thought, because once again those squares are weak and I have even simpler time to attack my opponent's weaknesses. And it's even more difficult for him to make d5 possible. From this point of view, I definitely knew that I have equalized the position. Now it's about whether I can outplay my opponent or it's going to be a draw. My opponent plays queen to e2, bringing more stuff into the game, preparing to develop his rooks. And here maybe the first inaccuracy that I made, because according to the principles we have already learned, I should just continue developing my pieces, bringing it to the game. Like the move rook a to d8 was on my agenda, but somehow I decided, well, I need to explore those weaknesses, so let me do that with the help of my queen and play queen to f5. Later on in the game, I regretted my decision because I'm breaking this principle, and then my opponent has an opportunity to play something like king g2, queen f3, and then either I should decide to trade the queens or waste yet another tempi with the queen to go back. I didn't like either of the options, so yeah, just don't overcomplicate it, just focus on the most important principles and you would be good to go. My opponent plays rook a to d1, continuing his development and supporting the d pawn. I'm doing the same because I'm thinking, okay, now it's definitely time for me to bring all of those pieces, and then a big surprise comes to my eyes. My opponent plays f3. And this is a very instructive moment for us. I want you to never make such moves, because you are unnecessarily creating weaknesses in your own camp. Just never do that. There is absolutely zero reason to do it. Like, yes, I understand my opponent wanted to simplify the defense for him. Like, I don't have the idea to play queen to h3 and knight g4 anymore, threatening checkmate. But this is not that dangerous. If I play queen to h3, he can just play queen to f3 and then knight g4, queen to g2. Or like I said, just play king to g2 and control those squares. And another idea, maybe he wanted to protect against his knight to g4, which seems like a threat, like I'm attacking the knight, but it's not in fact a threat. This is the biggest mistake I notice low-rated players are making. They're afraid of a certain thing happening, so they try to defend against it in advance. In reality, it turns out that either it's not a threat at all, or it's really a threat, but not as dangerous as they might have thought it is, and they're making a much bigger problem to stop that, like this move f3. Now it's going to be a weakness for the entire game, and I would argue that was the first reason why my opponent lost the game. So never commit yourself to creating weaknesses without a very good reason to do it, like really a necessity to do it, either to attack your opponent or to defend against his threats, but here it was definitely not the case. Imagine how cool it would be to play chess without ever having opening troubles again. What if I told you I could teach you all openings you will ever need in just 10 days? You get lifetime access to more than 110 pure value video tutorials, almost 100 practical tasks to apply your knowledge immediately into practice, 30 plus bonus videos to dive 10 times deeper, as well as private community where all questions you might ever have are answered daily. Get the $200 limited time discount with the link in the description and forget about all opening pain once and for all. So I was happy about it. I decided I need to finish my development. That would help me to exploit that weakness. I need to open up the center now, because then the f3 pawn is going to be very weak. And in fact, it's more difficult. Like if you play rook e1, if you want to place your rook along the e file, then this f3 pawn would be constantly hanging. Like, why on earth would you create a problem, a headache for yourself? My opponent plays rook to d3. He wants to double the rooks along the d file, and here is the moment for me, I thought, to break through, to do something very active. Because if you notice, first of all, I have mobilized all of my pieces. My opponent didn't. His rook on f1 is still very passive. If that's the case, then you should realize this is your chance. You must use it right now. This is the third tip, very, very powerful, I want to share with you today. If you have the initiative, you must use it. Otherwise, it's gonna disappear. Because your opponent is gonna get a chance either to finish his development or to deal with the weakness or just to destroy that problem that was the problem for him before. And then you're not gonna get a second chance. For example, here the rook on d3 is vulnerable. It's attacked by my queen and potentially by my rook, and it's only protected one time. But if I wait just one move, then my opponent is gonna play rook to d1, complete his development, protect the rook, and I don't have any active opportunities anymore. So I decided, okay, I feel this is the moment. Now it's important for me to find the best way to use this moment. This is a completely different story, as you understand. So there are so many active opportunities for me. Feel free to pause the video for a second here and try to find the best move for black. I was thinking mainly about c5 and e5, because those are the moves to somehow shake the balance here in the center, put pressure on it, and create weaknesses. Once again, it's all about weaknesses in my opponent's camp. It turned out the right move was the one I even haven't thought about at all. Can you imagine that? The best move, according to the engine here, is to play b5. Yes, it achieves the same goal. It creates some problems for white. It attacks the pawn. You need to somehow deal with it. If you are going to play b3 to protect the c4 pawn, it's going to significantly weaken your pawn structure. If you are going to take on b5, then d4 becomes an isolated pawn, a huge weakness for the entire game afterwards. d5 is going to be in black's control. Very, very annoying move to deal with. c5 also doesn't help, because once again, those pawns are going to be very, very weak. And also, notice we both have dark squares bishops. So you don't want to have your pawns to be on the dark squares, because your bishop is so stuck doing absolutely nothing, whereas my bishop is going to be able to attack those dark squares weaknesses. And also, nobody is guarding the light squares in this case, because my pawns are on the light squares, so light squares are under control for me, whereas I have a dark squares bishop to control the dark squares. All of the squares are under control. But if you make a move such as c5, then nobody is guarding those light squares, and this is a huge problem for white. Unfortunately, I wasn't that smart to come out with this b5 idea. I played the move e5 because it looked more concrete for me, and practically it worked fantastically in the game, because I raised a question to my opponent. I asked him, like, what are you gonna do about those pawns? Because I literally want to open up my rook here, which stands in front of your queen, and that would lead to some discover attacks. Also, your king is now somehow opened. That is another disadvantage of that move f3. I mean, this is such a ridiculous move. You never want to make that one in your own games. Now, my opponent play d5, which I also considered the main move for him, the engine says, no, you shouldn't panic like that. You should just complete your idea, your development with rook f to d1 and carefully calculate all of the captures. It's nothing. There is nothing to worry about. But from a human perspective, yes, opening up such a file, when your queen is standing there in front of your opponent's rook, this is so dangerous. After d5, I had a very concrete idea. So my bishop is here on e7. This is my worst placed piece. Remember, this is one of the questions you should always focus on during your games. Now, I want to improve this piece. How can I do that? Well, I can play bishop to b4, which is attacking my opponent's very, very important defender. Once it's gone, then d5 pawn is in huge trouble. My opponent plays rook f to d1 now, finally finishing his development, but remember this pawn on f3, which is a huge problem. And also, now I'm so fully mobilized. Those rooks are perfect here, especially this e-file that has to be opened. So this is my idea. This is why I am taken on c3 with the bishop. He takes it back with the pawn, because if you take with the rook, then d5 pawn is hanging. So he takes it back. Notice that the pawn structure is horrible. Now I first take on d5, not to allow my opponent to open up the d file. Always think about your opponent's idea. It doesn't matter how excited you are about your own plans, ideas, like you think I'm gonna destroy my opponent now. No, forget about everything once your opponent makes a move and try to understand what he wants to do. Even if he just takes back your bishop, you are thinking, okay, my opponent doesn't have any ideas at all. No, that's not true, 100%. He always has some ideas in mind, some dreams, some hopes, and you need to understand that. You need to get inside of his brain, understand what he wants to achieve, and make sure it's never possible. Yes, chess is a very cruel game. So I'm taking here on d5, my opponent has to take back because you cannot take with the rook, the knight is guarding that square, and now of course I play e4 with a double attack, an idea to open up my rook on the e8. This is exactly why I started doing that in the first place. My opponent takes it. I have now different ideas to take it back. Let me know in the comments what would be your choice. I decided to take it here with the rook because my queen is still very active, my knight still has an opportunity to jump to attack the bishop, and my second rook has a chance to join the party along the e-file and put even more pressure on my opponent's position. So this should be always your focus during a chess game. Try to mobilize and improve all of your pieces, find the best squares for all of them. My opponent plays queen to f2, which according to the engine is a blunder, but frankly it's so difficult to find a better move. It turned out the best one was queen to f1 with a very similar idea, but there the bishop is not protected twice, but the bright side is knight g4 doesn't come with a double attack. So it's very difficult to understand all of that. Anyway, I played the move queen to h5, and now he plays d6. d6 is a very smart idea, because now, once I play knight g4, I mean, of course, you cannot not make such a move, because it's a triple attack, actually. I'm attacking the queen, the bishop, and the h2 pawn. Now the queen cannot go, let's say, to f3 because of queen takes h2 check. That would be so horrible for white. So you need to be very careful. The only square to protect everything and not to lose the queen is to play queen to e2, protecting the pawn on h2 and the bishop on e3, but the problem is now it's a pin again and the bishop cannot go there. And I decided, well, I'm very smart, now I'm gonna play queen to e5 and just pin this bishop yet again, attack it once again, and there is no way to defend it. If you are gonna play rook e1, that would be a very passive move, and I can, to say the least, just take the pawn on d6 and then attack the bishop once again. By the way, the reason why I couldn't have played rook d to e8, attacking with the rook, because of d7, and now my rook is in trouble, I cannot just ignore it because he's gonna take it with a check. So that was the point. Queen to e5, and I was expecting something like rook d5, attacking my queen. I just go back to e6, and then everything is protected, the bishop is under attack, you have absolutely zero chances to defend it, so I basically expected my opponent to resign. But maybe that was the problem, that I haven't really thought enough about my opponent's resources. Remember, this is one of the questions of the method. What's your opponent's idea? His idea was to play queen to f3. This is so tricky. Like, it's winning here for black, but to find the winning path, it's pretty difficult. And even though I have made the first moves correctly, this is to take the bishop with the rook, because if you take with the knight, then he can just play rook d to e1 now, and there is no way to save the knight. If it goes away, then this rook is going to be hanging, and I'm basically an exchange down. If I defend it, then once again d7 is a huge problem. So instead of that, I'm taking with the rook here. Now he cannot take back, because then just queen takes e3, I'm a knight up. He takes on g4. And now I'm making the second move of the variation correctly. I exchanged the d3 rook, and here I'm making a mistake. Like, I have decided to go for a safe path. I have taken here on d6 and ended up being a pawn up in the queen's endgame. In reality, I had a much better solution here. Starting with queen to e1 check, he plays king to g2, and then I have this amazing move, rook to e8. I just completely ignore the threat of d7, and I didn't make it exactly for the reason that I don't want to allow my opponent to have such a huge pawn, such a huge passer here. But it turned out d7 just doesn't work, because I have rook to e2 check. And now if you go away with the king, I have queen to f1 check, the only move king h4, and then rook takes h2, queen h3, you have to play the only move, and then queen takes checkmate. So that doesn't work. And finally, if you just take with the queen, hoping to somehow sacrifice the queen but promote another one, it doesn't work, because it's a check and I'm attacking the rook. I'm gonna take it next move and the game is over. So after rook to e8, you have no opportunity to play d7, but somehow subconsciously I was thinking this is a huge problem for me. I just don't want to allow that. If my opponent somehow manages to deal with the threat, I don't know, play queen to f3, for example, covering that square so that after rook to e2, he has king to h3, the king escapes, but now I have to deal with this pawn. Like, how do I do that? I didn't want to take that risk. It turns out that wasn't such a big threat, and I should have done it. As I mentioned before, my idea was just to take on d6, my opponent takes, and then we have this very, very instructive endgame. So the engine says that's completely equal, just a draw here. But from a human perspective, good luck making a draw in such a position. It's so complicated, this queen's endgame. It's very tough to win such a position, but it's even more difficult to make a draw, because your opponent is going to create so many threats for you. So I played here queen to d1, then I decided to give a few checks just to get some time on the clock to be closer to the move 40 when you get an additional 30 minutes of time. My opponent plays king to g1, I repeat the moves here once, and then I take on a2. And we have this position. We have 3 against 2 in my favor on the king side, and we each have a passer on the queen side. But with the queens on the board, it's all about the king's safety. Please remember, it's so crucial. Queen's endgame, you have to watch out for your king. Make sure it's safe, and make sure you can attack your opponent's king, and then you're good to go. The second important thing is your queen's activity. You always should make sure that your queen is as active as possible. And the third important factor, the passers. If you have a passer, try to push it as far as possible and as fast as possible. So let me walk you through this instructive endgame. My opponent plays queen to e4, I play g6, he goes c4, he tries to push the pawn, as I said, to use his advantage, but the problem is his king is really very vulnerable. Now king to g2, according to the engine it's a mistake, king to f2 is the best move, but once again, good luck trying to understand that. I play the move queen to b2, and now he tries to escape, king to h3, but this is a big mistake, and that one I understood, because the king is so vulnerable. Remember what I have told you about king's safety. This is the main focus in the queen's endgame. Now the king is very vulnerable, and I immediately am starting about some checkmating ideas, and this is what I did in this game. I managed to checkmate my opponent with the queens on the board using the pawn. Let's see how I managed to do it. First of all, I played the move queen to f2. I decided this is the most appropriate position for my queen, because it doesn't allow the king to go back, it threatens queen to f1, and it stops the move c5. So what can be better than that, controlling absolutely everything? My opponent plays queen d5, seemingly a very good move, centralizing the queen, attacking the f7 pawn, and preparing the move c5, c6, and then that would be huge. But of course, I'm only thinking about this king. I have timed the c5, c6, 4 moves up to the point where he promotes another queen. I need these 4 moves to checkmate my opponent's king, and this is exactly what I am focusing on. I start with the move h5, which The engine is not a big fan of, for some reason. He prefers to start with queen to f1 check, king to h4, and then h5. It's very, very difficult to understand why, but I really liked it this way. My opponent plays c5, and now I'm playing king to h6, which is a blunder according to the engine here. I mean, this is so amazing. Why on earth would it be a blunder? Not because it loses the game or now white can make a draw, but because there was a much better opportunity for me, which I didn't use. But let's see what my idea is, because from a human perspective, you really want to make the move queen to e5. Now the queen is as powerful as possible. It's threatening some checks like queen to h8, and it's threatening the check queen to f4, exchanging the queens, and then white is suddenly winning, because you just push your pawn all the way, the king is not in time to stop it, white wins. So why on earth wouldn't you want to make the move queen e5? The problem is, it turns out that loses the game immediately. Why? Because I play queen to f1 check first, I push your king to h4, and then I made an amazing move, f6, which I'm pretty sure my opponent is completely missed, because now queen f4 doesn't exchange the queens. Yes, if I take it, that's going to be a disaster for me. My opponent is gonna win, but thank God I have counter check, g5, blocking the check from my opponent, giving a check of my own, and that is a checkmate immediately, so my opponent resigned here. Now, of course, as a big thank you for watching this video till the end, you deserve to know how you can win a completely free lesson with me. All you need to do that is first hit the like button on this video, and secondly, write in the comments what is currently your biggest challenge in chess. I'm very curious to know it. And then, of course, come to our celebration stream on Saturday, because I'm gonna do the giveaway live. I'm gonna choose the winner and we are gonna celebrate it together. Now, as promised, the life-changing method that's gonna help you to focus on the right thing during your chess games and win so many more games. Definitely take a look at that.